Okay,
So Jenna, why don't you let us know when you actually do start?
It's on.
Okay, great. We are good to go.
okay. The reason we gathered today is because the board has asked us to look at the bylaws to make any suggested changes in the event that the board votes to change our current composition from 11 members to 9 members. And I know Phil has worked on certain aspects of it, Mike also, and Vanessa. So, Mike, do you want to start, or Vanessa want to start first?
The issue that I had raised at the meeting that needs to be addressed is how to deal with the election, when the vacancies are going to occur and be filled, because as our current membership of the board stands right now, it would leave us with our current bylaws call for us to have 2 people elected every year, except for every 5th year when we have 3 people elected. If we drop down to 9, presumably we'd want to change that to 2 every year with 1 every 5th year, in some fashion. But the way, if you look at when our current members come due for re-election, they don't line up like that. We've got 1 year with 3 people and then several other years with only 1 person. So it's very uneven right now. So if we want to somehow transition from our current terms as they stand into a new set of terms that line up with what would be expected, then we need to handle that transition in some way. So I don't know. Phil, did you take a crack at that?
Yeah, Phil did play with that, so
All
go
right.
ahead.
So I'm very interested to see what you came up with.
So I looked at it from a perspective of I wanted to try to have the minimal impact to get this to line up the right way and get it done in the shortest period of time. And I put a priority on anybody who was a fully elected 5-year term, that those terms should be stable. And this is what I came up with. Let me share this out. Okay, so let's see. Next year, Peter's seat's coming up, and that's a 5-year position. And technically, as I'm filling in right now, there would be the position that I'm replacing would be coming up. But if we had the second seat for this coming election be for a single year, whether we actually have it as elected or whether we figure something else out, whatever we're going to do, that helps us line things up. So that in 2023, that's when Michael's seat would be coming up, and whoever filled that previous year for me. And when I say for me, I just mean that position. All the names on here, it's just that's the current person in the position is what I'm referring to. Obviously, nobody has any guarantee of continuing in any role or even wanting to. So if we had a 5-year position replacing Peter and a 1-year position or some other way to fill that next year, then the following year, Michael's seat comes up, and that's a 5-year position. And the 1-year fill-in would come up, and that would be a 5-year position. The following year, Kathy and Barbara's full-term seats come up, and they go up for election again. The following year, Marcia's seat comes up, and that was a 5-year. Norina's was, I think, a fill-in of 3 or 4 years, but either way, both of those come up, and that's 2 elections right there for a 5-year position. 2026 is where Tony and Vanessa, who just came in, their 5-year terms come up, so those 2 positions come up again. And then in the following year, we've got Peter's seat, or whoever fills that again in the next election would be coming up, and we're back to a normal cycle. So the changes would be first in eliminating the 2 positions that aren't currently filled. Secondly, in having a single year position coming up this next election just to fill this and get the math right. And the third change would be that Norina's seat actually ends up being available on the 2024 election, but we would decline to fill that in 2024 and move that to 2025 so that it lines up. And again, that doesn't mean that Norina if she wanted to continue, couldn't run for the 2 seats that become available in 2024 or whatever else. But in terms of not shortening anyone's tenure and getting everything to line up to 4 2-year positions and then a 1-year position, or 4 2-year terms, and then, I'm sorry, let me try it again. 4 board positions for full terms for 4 years. We'll try this the 15th time. Ready? 2 positions for 5-year terms every year for 4 years, with a 5th year being a single position. It lines up if we make those 3 changes, which are again a 1-year gap position, and having 3 seats come up in 2024, but only filling 2 of them. And then moving this Peter year in 2027 to a single seat. Does that make sense? I'm sorry that in the end,
My
trying
only
to explain it, it
question,
went all over.
Phil, is about the 3 seats coming up and only filling 2. That would reduce the number of, how does that not reduce the number of members?
So right now we have 9 people,
Right.
correct? So if, and let me make sure, you might be correct, and I was trying to figure this. Let's see. So if Peter and Phil are both available next year, we're still at 9. And then in 2023, we've
But
got,
Phil, can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yep.
You're filling whose seat?
well, I'm saying the seat that I'm sitting in right now is technically up for election next year because I was just
Okay.
finishing this 1 year before an
Okay.
election cycle.
Okay,
So, but the reason I'm keeping names on here in part is because we currently have 9 people, which is the target. So I think
now
I have
what?
a point here. I might have missed
But
it.
Barb, can he just, I just want him to just go through this one last time for my question before we move on, because I think that
I think you're
there's
right.
actually just the one change.
So
And I wish you'd make it bigger on the screen if we're meant to follow along. So thanks.
I'm not used to sharing through this app, so I apologize.
No
Is
problem.
this doing the job? I can't see how it looks on your side.
Yeah.
This works for me. Yeah.
Much
Yep.
better.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this correct here. So by replacing Peter and me with a 1 year there, we maintain 9. And in the following year, we replace Michael's seat and the one that replaced me, and that maintains 9 and keeps the 5 years. You're right. We
It's just the one
Betsy and
change.
Barbara come up in 2024, and we keep them as is. Was Narina 2020? I think we might have the addition of another gap year.
Now, didn't Narina get elected this past year?
Yeah,
Or
but it
Tony?
was a,
For a 3-year term.
Oh, it was only for a 3-year term.
so
Yeah,
that
Right,
she's
because we had
actually up
vacancies.
with Kathy. So that's what it is.
That's-
You have to add Narina to 2024, and you would fill that seat for 1 year.
Right. Thank you.
So- But my question is, if I think this is all based on the assumption that, like, for me, if only one seat being up in 2027 is okay, why isn't it okay in 2025? I mean, I don't necessarily have to have complete symmetry. I think we were just trying to avoid, my understanding was we were trying to avoid the turnover of, like, 4 people at once, or, which would be
Right.
half of the board. I think 2 to 1, somewhere 1 to 3 people per year is not devastating.
If we put 3 people in 1 year, that puts 2 years at 1 person. So if we even it out this way, there's less of an impact over the board. I'm assuming that's the reason that this is the way that it was built before, where it's 2 every year and we throw the extra person in there. That this way there's minimal shakeup of the board in normal circumstances, and you can maintain, that everybody's tenure overlaps enough that there's enough knowledge remaining on the board at any given time. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as we codify it in here. But if we went with the idea of let's try to keep it as even as possible, then you're correct with the addition of one more gap year here. That puts it at 2 positions every year with 1 position in the final year. With, I think, the minimal impact to make it happen.
Could I make a different suggestion? Instead of doing the 1-year gap for the seat you're sitting in, could we make it a reduced term so then it came up at the other year where there was only one? So then basically in this one election, we take care of the gaps?
So you mean, for example, making this a 3-year seat?
Yes.
So the problem with that is in
And then it turns into
2023,
a
we have 10
5-year seat.
people. So if we made it 3 years, we would have 10 people in 2023.
Full seat from 2022 that was 3 years
2025.
would be up in year 5. So add
Which one
that to
year was, I'm sorry, the
2025.
fill seat goes to 25. You're all right.
So it means we've got, 1, 3, 2, 2, 1 is what we've got.
Yeah.
So listen, I know that it isn't 222, but quite honestly, I think the policy is, I think any recommended change that we make, if it only affects one election and of the upcoming one, then we're not carrying out for multiple years some adjustments. I just think it's
You're
way
absolutely
more
right.
straightforward.
I hear that, but I really don't like the idea of having more than necessary one election year, one seat years, and the reason is I feel on a 9-member board already to only have one seat coming up for election in a particular year, it really gives very little opportunity for the voting public to influence the membership of the board if you only have one single seat turning over on a 9-member board. I know there's a balance. You don't want huge turnover because that could be disruptive to the board and lose continuity. But if you have too little turnover, you're really losing the ability of the voting public who we're supposed to be representing. It's a lock-in. It's why, on corporate boards, you're not even, usually allowed to have this kind of overlapping board thing because you get this lock-in where people can't, exercise the right to, change the direction of the library if they're not happy with how things are going. And here we're going to have multiple years where there's only one single person up, and especially the way it is right now.
Yeah, they end up back to back.
What?
They end up back to back.
Yeah,
You're
so
right.
we have back-to-back years where we have only one seat up one year and one seat up. So for 2 entire years, you've only got, one seat each year up for election. I think that's going in the opposite direction of really, not giving.
Okay, so you guys want to make a suggestion in 2021 for a 1-year position in the 2022 election and an additional 1-seat position in an election 3 years from now. I don't disagree with your point, but my problem is with the protracted schedule of that, to me, is just as problematic, but for different reasons.
No, I like both points. I think the 3-year position makes it a lot simpler up front. But to Michael's point, the idea of 2 years with a single position coming up and then the following year is 3 positions.
Yeah.
It's not ideal.
To be honest, and I know this, in the short term, there seems to be a strong desire to have this set and in place in time for this next election. So to get this done sooner rather than later. So this is probably not on the table, but I am much more in favor of the idea of going forward with the charter amendment and switching us to 3-year terms and doing 3 people coming up every year on 3-year terms and shifting to a 9-member that way. It would, again, we would need the transition to make everything convert over and work that way. But I think in the long run, that's a better solution. But again, probably not, in the immediate right now, since people want this to happen right away.
Well, if you say,
They also don't have to happen all at the same time, right? I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, this policy, whatever we recommend as the change, impacts 2022 first, and there's ample opportunity for charter revisions and additional policy revisions. I am just a little bit uncomfortable in making a recommendation for a limited, and again, I don't even know if we're allowed to make them limited term seats to that point, given that our charter says a 5-year term. So we're assuming we have the ability to even say that we can take one seat and make it a 3-year position. I don't even know if we can do that.
That's a good point. I was thinking that too, and I was thinking the exact same thing, that we were told that, basically the charter is what establishes the length of term. So can we do this? I think we might be able to by defining the particular years that the seats are in, and those would just be partial terms being filled early. So if we define basically next year for the 2022 election, one of the 2 seats that's up for election that year is actually the 2025 seat that is being filled for the remainder of that term. If we say it's 2 seats in this year, 2 seats in this year, 1 in this year, whatever, we define what cycle each of our 5-year terms is in. Those terms that are in a partial part of the cycle, we may be able to just fill for the remainder of that term, and then once this first round of years is done, everything will be on 5-year terms after that. I think we could. I don't know. I mean, I'm open to disagreement if we can't do that. Maybe I'm not thinking about it right, but we do have provision already that if we have 5-year terms, but if if their vacancy occurs in the middle of those 5 years, we can fill it for the remainder of those 5 years that's left on the term. So this would be the same idea by just defining, where each of the 5-year terms starts and ends, and filling the partials to handle the transition.
Well, Mike,
So-
I just want to pop in here. I like your idea of the charter amendment. Over the years, many people have said a 5-year commitment was too much for them. And I think as a starting point would be there. We say that the board wanted us to look at this, and they did, but in order to change what we're contemplating here down to a 9-member board, you do have to have, a 2/3 vote. And I don't see that currently available. I think, we should do our due diligence and look at the things and see what we can change. But I think the most productive thing probably would be, what Mike, you have just suggested. And that would give us time, number one, to really think through the entire process and, get feedback from folks, whether they would like to reduce that 5-year term to 3.
I completely disagree. I think there are 2 different issues. I actually think I am not opposed to the suggestion of the charter amendment to reduce the term length. And maybe we were joining the wrong 2 issues. So we started here looking at sort of the election cycle as it related to a 9-member board. But perhaps we should join this cycle discussion with the charter amendment for a reduced term. Because as far as I can see, it doesn't pose a significant problem for the upcoming election 2022 to our sort of board turnover. If we were a 9-member board, it's the subsequent year that's problematic. So that gives us, to me, ample time to address the charter amendment for term length, and then this section of the bylaws as far as election spread.
So I don't see a problem with going with both. The difference being that we've got a roughly year-long timeline in trying to get the charter changed, and we can essentially make this happen in a month or so, and certainly prior to the next election. To Barbara's point, we currently have a 9-member board that's listed as 11.
Yep.
To make changes to the bylaws, or to, I assume, try to make changes to the charter, we need 8 out of 9 people. And I think that's a problem, because if we're going to try and make the board more functioning so that we can actually serve the library instead of constantly trying to figure out where we fit, what we do, and how to make our jobs work, then we're not going to get anything done with needing 8 out of 9 people on board.
Correct.
So I think we need to try and get 8 out of 9 people on board for some quick changes and for some long-term changes. And, to Vanessa's point, we can we can enact something like this and we can get the ball rolling for the charter change. And when the charter change comes through, we can meet again and we can redesign how this lays out and make those changes again as well and make that update in the bylaws or anything else. I mean, even though we've got this written out to how this fits for the next 5 years and for a full election cycle for the whole board recycling, it doesn't have to stay in place for the next 5-10 years. This just stays in place until we address it again.
Yeah.
So,
But actually, I guess what I was saying, Phil, is that to me, I don't see this one as our first step. Because for the 2022 election, we're okay. We know we have 2 seats that are up, which is
No,
kind of our goal.
we actually have, if we don't make this change, we actually have 4 seats coming up. So we have more than a third of the board.
Correction. I meant assuming, so first, addressing if we're reducing to a 9-member board.
Right.
I honestly, we're gonna have the same issue with every single vote. It's gonna need to be 8 out of 9. I'm not confident that, one, it remains to be seen if we'll get 8 out of 9 for the board member reduction, but keep in mind that also applies to needing 8 out of 9 to want the charter amendment, 8 out of 9 wanting to adjust this cycle. And so to your point, Phil, in order for us to actually function and make any changes to function, I think I see the number of members on the board being the pressing issue so that we can reestablish quorum and a majority vote. Otherwise, every single one of these will need to be nearly unanimous. And I don't have a lot of confidence in that.
Absolutely. To bring up something that Michael pointed out before, the open positions, I don't have that information in front of me, and I couldn't find it online. That we did that, what the terms were for those open positions. So when we talk about Peter and my current physical seats coming up next year, we know Peter is a fully elected 5-year term, and this is his fully elected 5-year term coming up. Technically, the 3 other seats that are coming up next year are, one of them is probably a full term, and the other 2 are probably filling out partial terms. So we can sort of game it to a 3-year or whatever we need to do by picking which of the 2 positions we eliminate and which one we keep in there. And that's not really making a fundamental change, but that helps line this up at least for the next few years so that we can implement the smaller board and then look at the charter changes and then come back to reorganizing the election cycle and everything else. I don't think there's any problem with trying to get that done. And I think we just need to get everybody on board to make fundamental changes now so that we can get the board back to where we can function to the point where we can assist the library in doing what they need to do.
I just want to clarify one thing. Bylaw changes need a 2/3 vote for the 8, but normal functioning would be 6, if I'm not correct, Tim, correct?
6 is quorum.
Yes, except for all the changes we just talked about here are bylaws
What was the
changes.
bylaw changes?
I'm making an assumption that the charter being more fundamental than the bylaws would also require 2/3, but that's an assumption.
I would make that same, I had that same assumption.
Yeah, it still means worst case scenario, we need 6 out of 9 instead of 8 out of 9, which is still not, nothing's guaranteed.
Yeah.
Mike seemed like he wanted to say something about 5 times.
Well, yeah, it's okay. A couple things. I mean, I agree that we're faced with our current, status quo right now, where we have an 11-seat board with only 9, serving members is not a good long-term situation, and we need to take care of that one way or the other. And I agree that, in the short term, we can't do, the charter amendment. That's going to take longer than would be feasible. That's going to have us, our hands tied for too long. So our only 2 options in the short term is either, if we can get 8 out of 9 agreement on doing the, dropping to 9 seats and do what adjustments we need to do. Now, the one thing I want to say is we have to address when, the length of the seats and everything, because it matters for the 2022 election, even though there's, under whatever plan we come up with, there'd probably just be 2 people 2 current members whose terms are coming up, and we'd want 2 new seats in that, or 2 votes in that election. We have to figure out how many years those are for to make everything line up. So we do have to work this all out kind of punt this off for the future. If we're going to go down to 9, we got to figure out how the terms are going to work because it matters for this first election coming up.
So I think we're actually good with it. And the reason I'm saying that is because every seat on here is coming up on its normal due date, myself excluded. Every seat on here is coming up with its normal due date as a 5-year term. So it's just this year that we've got the 2 seats we're trying to eliminate and my filling in of the year that are all up for grabs. As long as one of those 3 seats has 3 years left, then we change nothing. We just pick which 2 we want to eliminate and everything's great. It's only if none of those land right that it's a problem. But the fact that we've already got a 3-person year in 2024, which would be normal for us, and that 2025 only had 1 person, that makes me think one of these positions had to have been due in 2025, and we should be solid.
So
That's something we should be able to clear with Tim or Jenna.
Is Jenna still there, Jenna?
Well, I know when all the terms are, if anybody wants to know that.
That's,
Yeah.
when did Narina, when would her term have been ended?
Well, Narina's term is up in 2024 because she that's the 3-person year. She's serving that would have always been the 3-person year. She
Right.
filled a partial term for 3 years to fill out one of the terms that was due in the 3-person year.
Sorry, what
So,
about
I mean,
Noreen and
Right.
Caitlin? Those are the years we need
Right.
to.
Caitlin, her term was up this coming year. So she had a 2022. Caitlin was going to be up.
Okay.
Right. So that would have been the other one along with Peter that would be up. 2023 would have been Noreen along with me. So we were the 2 that would have been up in 2023.
So
Then
why don't we
Okay.
just have Phil fill Noreen's spot and
Well-
we eliminate Caitlin and
I think there's a simpler solution. I think. Tell me if this works. What if next year for 2022 we fill 2 5-year positions? So basically just Peter's seat and Phil's seat. We refill those as 5-year positions. 2023 we leave as just a 1 seat because we have to have 1 year that only has 1. So we leave 2023 as only 1 seat. 2024 we fill 2 5-year terms and 1 1-year term, which would be the 25 extra one. And then 2025 would be 2 years. And now we're back to 2 1 2 2 2. So it's all, we get rid of the 3-person year. And we only have 1 odd filling, which is in 2024 where there's 3 seats coming up. We'd instead have 2 seats and a single.
right. That's what Phil presented at the beginning.
No, it's a little different, but and I get that. I think we missed somebody. When was Richard's term up? Because if Richard's term is the one,
Richard's term is in 2025.
so I think that jives with this. If we eliminated Caitlin and Noreen's positions and left Richard's on the board, the 3-year position that's coming up, or the election cycle for 2022 would be Peter's 5-year and the rest of Richard's 3 years. And then everything lines up like we have it here. Again, I know it's odd and it leaves us with that 1 3 2 2 1, but I anticipate that not lasting because we're looking at addressing the charter, and then that fundamentally changes how long these positions run, and we rebalance this whole thing again.
I agree. I do want to limit how much time we bend our brain on this, especially if we're advocating for a shorter term, because I mean, I know that I don't have to say this, but I am in favor of that. And so to figure out this puzzle for 5-year positions and then do work to immediately reduce terms to 3-year positions, then it becomes moot and we have to redo it anyway.
Yeah, so the only reason that I'm leaning in this direction here, Mike, is because then ultimately what we're doing, the only thing we're doing is we're saying this position and this position are eliminated, and we've got Richard's position up for the remaining 3 years, and that's the only change. We're done in the 2022 election, and everything else remains what it would have been.
I don't know. We don't need to belabor this. It's 140. I am in favor of the simplest vote first because all of this is moot if we don't have a path to 9-member board. Then we have to have different discussions,
Well,
completely different discussions.
we also have to, as I said, I don't see us having the 8 votes. you know, maybe things will change. But I think, if we don't, then we should fill those 2 seats. You know, with an interview process and acceptance, you know, from other people. And you know, sooner rather than later.
Well, obviously, but we were sent off with the task of coming up with a proposal because there was enough interest in the board to
Mhm.
take this up as a vote. And so
Right.
I'm not ready to discuss the other things until we put this before the board and have our vote and know where we stand.
Well, but the other thing too, it seems like everybody here is in agreement of changing the charter to a 3-year term. And that's a process that we'd have to probably begin in January. So can we propose to the board as one of our statements from today's meeting that we would like Tim to pursue the necessary paperwork or whatever is necessary to make that change? Would anybody object to that?
No, but I don't know that that's a proposal that has to come from this policy
Well,
committee.
It probably,
It may not be. I don't know exactly where it would have to come from, but we are talking about it at this moment, and there's nothing stopping us from saying to the board, we also would like to do this and getting board approval. Otherwise,
fine.
we'll just
I
be
guess-
down and figuring out who does it.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess, again, I want to make sure that they're separate. I don't want to present them the same. My immediate concern, and that's the last time I'll say this, is addressing the number of members on the board. Because I feel like we are saddled in making any decisions or getting anything passed. Introducing anything else that might complicate folks making a decision on that issue, I am hesitant to do. I am not opposed to introducing the topic as long as it doesn't interfere with the discussion and decision on the composition of the board. That's all I'm saying. There could be people who are opposed to a 3-year term. I do not want that to be tied to our proposal for a 9-member board.
no, there would be two separate, you know, bullets, so to speak.
So
And
we
2
could,
separate bullets, depends on how people interpret it. I'm just stating my
Oh.
concern about that.
I think it's a great point, and I think to further accentuate that, what we could do is, you know, in the section of the meeting where we go through each of the committees and what they've done, we have the bylaw change. And in the section of the meeting where it's new business, we request that on the docket, there's a conversation about changing the charter to a 3-year term. Those are completely separate, not even really part of the policy committee, separate discussions with space between them. And I think that might be a good way to address it and keep your concerns in play.
Mhm. That sounds good to me.
So I'd actually remove that from the minutes of the, we talked about it, we're not removing
Yeah.
it. But I'd
Right.
like to confirm that that's not a proposal of this, per se, of this committee.
Right. It was something that was discussed at the board meeting, and we would just like that to be an agenda item for the current board meeting for us to discuss it and think about getting that ball rolling.
Mhm. And in the meantime, Tim, you could find out what would be necessary and report that, you know, when it comes up into new business. Right? Now,
Is
in-
Tim in the meeting? I think it might be down to us. They might have facilitated and rolled away. No, he's here. Look at
oh,
that.
he's there.
Awesome.
Okay,
So what you're saying there, Barbara, is I need to find out what would be necessary to initiate the charter change process?
correct,
Okay,
correct,
I'll
okay?
send an email right now.
Now that we're saying this out loud and switching gears here, from what Tim Burke said, I think he typically would assist in that, whether it's with the board or with Tim Wiles. It would be that we just reach out to Tim Burke to say, what do we need to do? And he'll walk us through the process and get things going.
Mhm.
So
I think that's what Tim plans.
good.
The other,
So I haven't been here in the past when the board has voted on appointments. What is that just a simple majority?
yes,
So it's 6?
To fill this vacancy here?
Yeah, in general, to fill vacancies when we were 11-member board, it's a vote of 6?
6. Mhm. Correct.
It's a vote of 6, no matter how many are in attendance. So,
Exactly. So again, I just, yeah. Anyway, I would just wanted that clarification. I
Okay.
continue to be very concerned about our ability to pass things in our current state, whether it is to bring on new members or to change bylaws.
Okay, now, in the event that this change does not go through, we really need to look at the bylaws and, well, a couple of things. Under section terms of office, section C, it clearly stated that the person having the next greatest number of votes that didn't win the original seats would be offered the term. But should we not suggest that the other person who was interested in running, in other words, have a succession, which isn't in the bylaws, to offer that next person a seat?
So I can see pros and cons each way, and let me just real quick lay this out. And I find it a little funny, Barbara, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but it's just funny how things shift, because when last year, when this provision of automatically filling an incomplete a vacant term with the runner-up in the election, when the board had discussed that, you were the most vocal opponent of having that in, because you didn't want to take away the board's ability to reject someone or not put someone in if they thought they weren't a good candidate, just because they were. I find it funny that we're now pushing to go even further down the list. So it's just, but
Your arguments must have convinced me.
well, no, so I can see it both ways. I mean, it's obviously there's an advantage in being able to fill those vacancies very rapidly. People who have already run in the election but didn't get a seat have already basically shown that they are interested and expressed an interest. And so you could argue that, not only the first runner-up, but additional runners-up, it would let us just keep filling those seats and get people on the board. The argument on the other side, though, is the further down the list you're going, the further you're getting from anything that the voters of this library district actually, chose. When you have the runner-up, you can say, well, there have been times in the past where there were only as many candidates as there were seats, and every single person got on. The runner-up is just, if one fewer person had run that year, they would have got on. It's close. But the further down the list you go, the further you are away from anything the voters actually approved. And I just, so it's kind of a balance. You could there was just last year during the pandemic and everything, where there was a whole slew of resignations in a very short period of time. If you had been pulling people from elections, I don't know how many people ran in those various elections, but you could have, in theory, been going pretty far down the list at one point of people on the election. And once you're getting down to the third runner-up in the election for however many seats, you're getting pretty far away from anything that the voters actually approved. And at that point, maybe you're better off just saying, let the board use its discretion and fill that seat. So that's kind of the counter argument. I do understand that the rapid, the ability to just quickly fill the seat is of a real benefit. But there's no guarantee that in the future that the runner-up is going to be someone who has experience on the board, who's done it before, who's someone who's a known quantity, any of those things. We were fortunate this time, but in the future, it might be just some person who's a unknown quantity who's there, and we really want to fill the seat, but then it's someone who's clueless and doesn't know what they're doing, and the voters didn't pick them anyway. So, I don't know. That's the trade-offs. I can see it both ways.
So
said as much.
There's no guarantee that the runner-up will be, that we'll have 2 Phil Metzgers. I don't think that we should. I'm not interested in exploring that. I think it's a slippery slope, and I think it takes selection away, like the spirit of election away.
So I apologize for having the outdated version of these up, but if we look at how it's written now, it says that we take the next candidate, and after that, it goes to the nominating committee.
Yep.
There's nothing stopping the nominating committee at this point using their discretion from looking at the next candidates on the list and making an offer, or not. using their discretion. So I don't think this necessarily needs to be changed, because I know there's been some contention about, like, do we ask Phil because he's the next person on the list, or do we not? And that's not explicitly in here if we're talking about the next seat and blah, blah. It's like, well, let the nominating committee deal with that. And all that matters is the board gets a candidate and the board says yes or no. And I doubt we'd be bringing candidates to the board who are interested in serving and not have everybody essentially on board saying, great, we need somebody who wants to serve. But I don't think we need to codify it any more than it is. I think we take the next person on the list, and after that, it's nominating committee picks people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. I mean, I do think there is some benefit, for example, in us being able to put Phil on the board, with these, quorum requirements and things like that, being able to just immediately put someone on without having to go through the time it takes to consider candidates, to put it up for a vote, to do all that stuff is a benefit. But maybe filling one seat is the right balance. Fill one seat, and once you get beyond that, and there's a second vacancy, you got to rely on the committee and let the board do it. So maybe we've struck the right balance for now. I don't know.
I mean, feasibly, 2 seats come up, and you've got me as the next person up and somebody else as the next person after that. The nominating committee could come into the very next board meeting and say, here's the candidate who had the next number of votes, and obviously we'd like to offer the position to them. And also, here's a person who we know is interested that we'd like to offer the position to them. It doesn't have to be a whole interview cycle and everything else. If the nominating committee wants to jump on it and say, these are people who are interested, maybe I even reached out to them and here they are, we can still fill seats quickly that way. It's if that doesn't pan out that we have to get into the let's try soliciting people, and we're going to have at least a month of a gap trying to get everyone involved.
Okay. Now, if you go to the committees under duties of standing committees, take a look at G, the nominating committee, and give us your thoughts on whether that is clear enough that they would be active and doing the job that we're talking about them doing.
So, Barbara, I think there's another provision that speaks to this, which is further back up. I don't. It's in the section where it talks about filling vacancies. So it's up.
The one we were just looking at before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one specifically speaks to the nominating committee. Right.
Oh, I didn't even notice we have another line in here. Okay.
Yeah, it says shall select interest from eligible persons. But Marcia had a problem with the definition of the duties of that we just had pulled up, that Phil pulled up. She didn't think it was clear enough in that section.
I'm unclear what we're looking at.
You're looking at duties of standing committees.
No,
So right now, if you look at that paragraph C, which on the bottom of the top page on the screen, bottom of that page, the last sentence of that paragraph, it says, if this candidate cannot serve, the nominating committee shall solicit interest from eligible persons and select a candidate who shall be presented for approval by the board. And this is the odd thing is this, the nominating committee, this is not its normal job, because usually the nominating committee has one and only one job. It just selects a slate of officers at the beginning of the year, and then it's done and it's disbanded and it's over. And they also select a new nominating committee to succeed them for the next year. But normally, for the whole course of the year, the nominating committee has no role. It's not part of their duties as they're described in the bylaws. The nominating committee basically gets created at the beginning of the year. They don't have any job until the end of that year when they nominate the people for the next cycle.
Even though it's referred to in the first section that we were reading, what Marcia wanted us to look at is G, to see if we can, put the duties of a vacancy in the duties of her committee.
I feel like it was already in that letter C.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, if we think it would,
There's a conflict between that and G of duties of the standing committee.
So to read what Barbara's referring to, the nominating committee is a committee of 3 trustees that shall be elected annually at the first meeting of the newly seated board. The nominating committee shall nominate 1 individual for each executive office and 3 persons to comprise the succeeding nominating committee pursuant to article this, that, at which time the duties have been fulfilled.
Yeah.
So what Barbara's saying is we should add in here, should vacancies appear on the board, the nominating committee will reconvene in order to assist in filling those vacancies.
so that's actually not. correct, because they would actually, the vacancies would be occurring before the stuff that's specified here. They would still disband just as it says, as this is the end of their term. So the current nominating committee that exists right now, they haven't done anything yet because their duties under this provision don't come up until the very end of this year. So this would be a new duty that would happen earlier in their term. It's not reconvening the nominating committee. It's just giving them a task when normally they just sit dormant for a whole year until they all of a sudden have a job at the end of the year.
Correct.
This would give them
To put in a sentence in this section
So
that would say what you just said, Mike.
yeah. So before that, before,
Right,
exactly. Right where
okay.
the cursor, right
Okay.
where that highlight after the, it defines
So right about here,
right here, say, should a vacancy arise, or maybe we just cross-reference to that.
Or just, should a vacancy arise during the course of the year, the nominating committee shall, and you can reference back to that, section C, whatever,
Yeah.
Article 3, Section 3C.
Yeah, I have a hard stop at 1.
Party who what?
I have a hard stop at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
2 o'clock, sorry. Goodness, where am I?
It's okay.
So
Now, can I just,
I'm cleaning that up.
when we've done vacancies in the past, they've been done a number of ways. The nominating committee, would look at candidates and resumes and then forward them on to the board. The board would then invite these individuals as a board, to make a final decision. Now, I don't know if it's anything that detailed or people like one way or another way that the nominating committee just recommends. But give some thought to that as well.
You mean more in something more than saying they'll present to the board for approval?
Right.
I-
Other words,
I
in the
think-
past, and I think Tim's been around to see some of this, that, the whole board interviewed maybe 3 candidates one evening and made a decision that night. But it was the whole board. It wasn't just a
Yeah.
3-member
I
nominating committee.
understand. I guess I thought that's what it was saying, that the nominating committee sort of narrows it and then presents to the board for approval, and which I assume there's like discussion and the presentation of the candidates and then the vote.
So,
Yeah.
as it's currently written, the nominating committee is only supposed to just give one person for up or down vote, like not multiple candidates to choose between, as I read it. Because it says select a candidate who shall be presented for approval by the board. So as I read, at least as it's currently written, the nominating committee is supposed to, for each vacancy, I guess, they're supposed to present one person and say, we've gotten interest from various people. This is the person we think is the best candidate. And then the board just votes up or down. And presumably if the board doesn't vote that person in, then I guess it's back to the nominating committee to present somebody else. But as it's currently written, I don't see a role for the full board to be voting between multiple candidates or considering multiple candidates against each other for the positions. I think that's put down to the committee level as it's currently written.
Can we possibly consider changing that? Because the practice has been the opposite. The people gather the information, narrow things down, as Vanessa said, and then the board will then interview 2 or 3 candidates and make a decision. Go ahead, Tim.
I think he had to jump off because he
Oh.
had another meeting he'd said in the chat.
Oh, okay.
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 I'm
He's lived through these scenarios, so.
I'm not sure how much of this paragraph was amended, because this paragraph was just changed like last year to, make that automatic filling provision in there. So I don't know if that the end of that paragraph about the role of the nominating committee, that also might be different from what used to be there. So the reason this might not fit with your recollection of how it's done in the past, maybe because this is just the first time that it's actually been like this, but I'm not positive of that because I haven't compared before and after or anything of what was there before.
So I'm inclined to support and agree that an addition of some language there that reflects the practice would be appropriate, merely from the perspective of, this is talking about filling vacant seats, which is always sort of requires some, you know, like a quick response. It seems to me that presenting the single candidate for an up or down vote, if they were not approved, prolongs the process of filling a vacancy.
I don't think we should go into too much detail. I think if we left it as select a candidate or candidates, that would be sufficient because it really just comes
Agreed.
down to,
That would do it.
yeah, and
That
you
would
know,
do it. Yes. That would be a very simple change.
as an example, the board knows I'm willing to fill in when somebody needs me for about 6 months. So if I was on the list, I don't think it necessarily needs 6 candidates to go through an interview process. I think somebody would reach out to me and I'd say, sure, I'm interested. And most people would probably be like, yeah, this guy does all right filling in for a few months, and that would be that.
I'll stop. I've heard much better things about it. I agree, and I think that's a good point. I don't think we want to saddle ourselves with some sort of expectation of like how many. Sometimes it might be one that they find, sometimes it might be multiple.
So as he says, if he puts candidate or candidates,
I agree.
that would cover it. Good.
Mike?
And what about, do we need to change that duties to make Marcia feel better? Have
did.
we
They did, they
changed
added it.
language?
It's highlighted.
Oh, good. Very good.
Was that, it's 3C. That would make more sense doing, oh, stop, get away button. 3.3 would be, 3.3.3 would be pretty weird. So 3.3C is what that is. Okay. So we have 3 proposed changes at the moment. We've got this section to 9 members. We have this section to specify that the nominating committee is involved in filling these roles. And we have this section where we're just adding or candidates so that they can use their discretion, bring multiple people if necessary, whatever needs to be done.
Mhm.
Mike had pointed out the part, and I'm not sure where it is. I apologize. I don't have a copy in front of me about quorum and majority. I think we should actually make sure that that's right after the first one.
Yeah, we need to fix the quorum because that's hard coded in there into our bylaws. It says that we have.
Yes.
Quorum and majority, both quorum and majority.
Yeah.
6.3, all right, 6.
And the last thing that we needed to, Jenna asked us to look at, we had talked about the meeting attendance. And that was
Sorry,
two.
Phil,
I
can you?
know, Vanessa, but whenever you have to go, just hop off.
I was just gonna say, Phil, do you mind putting that under the, right under the other, I'm losing my words. I'm so sorry, you all.
right.
The 9-member board one?
Yes, I'll reorganize that so it's in the
Oh,
right
okay.
order and so that it's grouped together. No problem. And I'll share, I have this up on the Google Drive for my Gilderland account. I'll just share this out to everybody so you guys can look at it, do what you need to do. I think,
Yeah, I think
besides
Jenna was
having
asking
our-
for it.
pardon me?
I was just looking at the chat and Jenna was asking for it.
Okay, I think besides the main thing we wanted to address immediately that I think we've got something we can present, I think we probably, with the stuff that we're trying to go through, could use another policy meeting when people are available to go through some more of the things that we've been talking about.
Oh, I agree, because there are some issues we were talking about prior to the vacancies that are sort of hanging in limbo. Right, Barb? They were the,
Well, Jenna asked us to look at this meeting attendance,
yes. that was
and
the
that
one.
was section B. And I don't know if Phil has what we had originally changed or suggested changes. Trustees are expected to attend all board meetings. However, it is recognized that absences may occur for excusable reasons. As a courtesy, trustees are expected to notify the director or president of any expected absence. Upon the second consecutive absence, the trustee is required. And we had meet with the board president, and I would like to change that to speak with the board president. I don't think there has to be a face-to-face on that.
So my apologies, everyone. I do have to go. I would like to participate in the discussion. I mean, of course, you're free to continue. I don't know how much longer the meeting was scheduled to go.
About 3 more minutes.
What?
So
It's just about 3 more minutes. This is the last thing.
I would just like to say about this provision, so we had presented this at the last board meeting, and, I don't have a good sense of what the feelings of all of the board members were about the changes that we had proposed on this particular provision. I don't have a good feel for that. I do know that Peter was the one that was very adamantly unhappy with what the committee had previously proposed on this point. I partially understand some of his concerns, but others I don't necessarily, because I think they're equally applicable about the existing policy that we already have in there. I feel like maybe it would be worth, and I could try and do this, or someone else could, reaching out to him specifically to kind of discuss his concerns and see if there's anything, because I have some thoughts. Maybe we could, there are ways to, change what we've proposed a little bit that would alleviate some of his discomfort or concerns about it. But again, I don't know if he's the only one that's not happy with it and everybody else is comfortable, then, maybe we just push forward and do it. I just, although we need 8 out of 9 for a bylaw amendment. So, even one person is awful close.
Was it aging for voting? I guess I thank you for bringing that up, because I forgot that it was, I didn't forget that it was presented, but where is it left in sort of the procedure?
It's been presented. So in theory,
We would vote on it at the next meeting.
if we want to vote on it as it was presented last time, or people can make amendments on the floor or whatever, it's been presented at a meeting. It's eligible for being voted on at the next meeting. We can, if people are, if 8 out of 9 members of the board are happy with what we proposed last time, we can just vote on it and put it in at the next time, and we don't have to, and that's done. I'm just not sure if we have 8 out of 9. And also there may be ways where we could improve it with his input, which again, in the context of that board meeting and just kind of the discussions as they went there, I'm not confident that I fully understand all of his concerns or what he'd be satisfied with. So I don't know to what extent we could alleviate those concerns or not. So, I'd be willing to just hold off for now, see if we could talk to him and understand his concerns better and possibly amend it further or readdress it. I don't see this. The missing 3 meetings thing, I don't see as being a pressing need that we need to get this changed immediately. This just seems a lot less important than the composition of the board issues that we were talking about earlier. So,
Right.
but
I agree.
I would be
like
happy to
Phil's
reach out
idea.
to
Let's
Peter.
meet again.
And I think, yes, we should, as much as it's a simple change in here right now, I think we should probably discuss this at another policy meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah, if we're going to do that, if in the meantime, the last sentence, if you guys would take a look at it, if at least 2 of the 3 consecutive absences are not deemed acceptable by the board, the trustee is deemed to have vacated their office. I think that's over and above the law. And they're saying if at least 2 of the 3, I would eliminate that last sentence, because I think it's not our prerogative to do that. But Mike, maybe you could take a look at that one.
yeah, I have to try and, I just hadn't had a lot of time, so I didn't get a chance to look at that yet. But
Okay.
there is,
I'm sorry. Bye, guys.
That's okay.
I'll
but-
see
Thank
you
you,
at the
Vanessa.
next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
and just to follow up on what Barb was just saying, we've been told that this 3 meeting rule, the missing 3 meetings without excuse, is in state education law and is not something we're allowed to make, expand on. Like, basically we have to live with that. We can adjust how that's actually implemented, like what the procedures are for, going about that or taking a vote or determining excuse, but we can't change the actual rule because that's hard coded into state law. So the question is, by making it that 2 out of 3 thing that we did there, is that conflicting with what state law actually requires and may actually be not allowed.
Not necessarily from a lawyer, but I have heard that the state law is essentially the minimum and that you could go above and beyond as a board. But I think that's why this needs to be a conversation where we get some feedback from
Yep.
Tim and
Well,
discuss it again.
Well, it's in this, it came up, and again, I'm hesitant. So one of these, the library, the trustee information sections, that book club, the trustee book club sessions that have been going on, at the first one of those a couple months ago, this issue came up in the Q&A, and the person, the expert, I don't remember his name or whatever, but the expert guy that was going through this, he's the person who wrote the state handbook for library trustees and everything. He said that it was you could not go beyond that, because his position was that the 3 meeting rule was too lax, and he felt that people should, that you should be, you should be able to get rid of people for much less than that, because board attendance is so important. And his position, he thought that a single unexcused absence should be enough to get somebody off the board. Unexcused, but he said, but your hands are tied, you can't do that, the state education law requires you to do, follow this rule, the rule. That was his position. I'm hesitant to take anything that we hear from those trustee education meetings as gospel, because I feel like we've gotten conflicting messages from them on various things, and I'm not 100% sure, so
I agree.
I'm just reporting what we were told, but I don't necessarily, that might not be correct.
Yeah.
And I've seen other libraries in our area, in the Upper Hudson area, that have provisions related to this that seem to differ in certain ways from what the state law is. Now, it may be that just various libraries just have policies that aren't necessarily fully in accord with state law. Just because some other libraries doing it doesn't mean it's right either. But it may be that we actually have more flexibility than we've been told. I just don't know which is the case.
Well, I think Tim reached out to our lawyer, and her recommendation, was you have to follow the law. It's 3 consecutive meetings, and you can't adjust for that. I think he has the back and forth on the email from her on that as well, that, he could share with us.
Okay.
So I'll try and get that out, if he can locate it. I know Phil read to us from the Albany policy, and
Maybe
they're over and above the law.
Yeah.
So, to me, as I said, the only thing I would change from what we presented was not requiring the individual to meet with the president, but to speak with the president.
Right.
In that last sentence, I think, would not pass muster with our lawyer.
Yeah. So why don't we, why don't we put this off for another policy meeting, and we'll try and get more information in the meantime. And then we can kind of reassess if we need to
Okay.
make changes.
The only other thing I want to say about it is that, I talked to Barbara earlier about just the history of the board, since she is the living history of the board. She's been on here since the beginning, right, Barbara?
Probably. It was early. Yeah.
That, I think this is a good example of one of the things that we've been dealing with in recent times in the board, which is a lot of effort going into solving problems that don't exist. Because we do not have a situation where we have a member who's, say, showing up to 1 out of every 3 meetings and, hitting the letter of the law, and we can't do anything about it. We've had people who show up and want to do work to help the library, with the caveat that sometimes, especially during this pandemic, we have people who are butting heads and don't have the ability to go out for a beer afterwards and just get square with each other. And I think we end up getting bogged down in some of the minutia that doesn't necessarily serve the library, but just puts the board at odds with each other. And I'm not saying this is necessarily that, but I mean, other than maybe changing it to speak instead of see or whatever we have there, I think as far as trying to go above and beyond what's in the law, we should just try to be where the law is and not complicate it, because it's not even a problem we've ever had to solve.
Well, so it actually, this did come up earlier this year. So back in, I think it was the July meeting. So it was the first meeting that I was at when I started. That was when the issue of one of the board members had their third consecutive meeting or absence announced that on very short notice without any real explanation given to the board, and the issue was brought up at that meeting that
Okay.
board member had three. And the issue kind of came up because it was brought up. Someone, I think Caitlin was going to reach out to that board member to ask about their reason for, their excuse for not, what their excuse was for missing those meetings. A very, very minimal explanation was given for one of the three absences, no explanation for the other two absences. That was kind of presented to the board, emailed to the board, or read to the board or something like that. And then the issue kind of was dropped and never came up again. And, I had a concern, which I've expressed before, which is that under the letter of our current bylaws, it's not clear to me whether, I think someone could make an argument that by operation of our bylaws, since the board had never acted to accept those excuses, that person would be deemed to have vacated their position. And so, my biggest concern about this particular provision is that it be crystal clear what the process is. And we know, if somebody misses multiple meetings in a row, we know what the situation is. Is that person still in the seat? Are they not still in the seat? And the bylaws don't leave any ambiguity about that, because I don't like us being in a situation where somebody could make a plausible argument under our existing bylaws that has already happened. And I don't think that's a comfortable position that we should be in.
Yeah. See, now, again, I agree with you, Mike, that, the letter of the law and all, but what has happened in the past when people have missed, like 2 meetings, one of us would reach out to that person and say, geez, what happened? Something happened in your family or whatever. We had one individual who missed a lot of meetings. Her son was involved in a lot of stuff at the school, and it conflicted and all that. And we didn't get any phone call or anything saying they weren't coming. So, I or somebody else would reach out, depending upon who was in the chair at the time, and say, is there a problem? Do you want to continue? And, family things come up, and as a board, we've always been very collegial about understanding that a person wants to serve, but they also have family obligations. And I know Vanessa, or Marina mentioned that, well, but if you sign up for the board, you gotta do the board thing. Well, no, life happens and things happen, and I'd like it to be crystal clear as we're trying to do here. But on the other hand, there's a human element that the chair sort of sets the tone. And I think that, in the past, that was handled by the chair, and we never really had any problems of anybody getting to that 3-point stage without contact. So, that was the case this time, I guess, but as Phil says, it was such a rarity. And in those cases where people were not showing up or not showing up for committee meetings, they were reached out to. That's why I suggested that, the trustee is expected to notify the director or board president if you're not going to be there. I mean, of course, you get hit in a car accident on Route 20 and, you're on your way to the library, you understand something like that. But if you're going to be away on vacation, or your wife is sick in the hospital, or your kid's birthday is that night, just call somebody so that they know you're not coming.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And maybe, maybe the amendment that we proposed was a little too regimented, and it required, saying, oh, after this many meetings, you've got to meet with so-and-so and do this and that. And maybe it doesn't need to be. My biggest concern is just clarity about the process. So that it's crystal clear, whether, if somebody has had 3 consecutive absences, have those absences been excused or have they not?
Right. And
Clear.
have to follow the steps of, calling somebody or letting them know. Then I can see, okay, then, 3 strikes and you're out. And it's crystal clear that you are to notify if you're not going to be there.
So I'm not a lawyer, and I definitely lean on the side of, what is the intent here over what is the specific wording. So I very much appreciate having your balance to my thoughts here, Mike. And perhaps what we could do is make sure this is lined up with the letter of the law that we're supposed to be following, with minor tweaks like, communicate with the board president as opposed to directly meeting with, whatever other minor tweaks you wanted to have in there. But even if we're not ultimately changing what's in here, the fact that we bring it and present it with this is a reaffirmation for everybody on the board that this is the policy and that this is what we are supposed to be following. And, we're not making a substantial change to this, but understand you are supposed to communicate with the board president. You do need to reach out if you're going to be absent 3 times in a row to have a conversation and explain, if this is still that you are going to be serving and that's your intent and something has happened, but it's over with now, so that we can resolve this. And should you not really be available and not willing to reach out and make sure there's an understanding of your situation, that you will be removed, because that is the policy and we need people to be on the board in order for the board to function. So perhaps we can accomplish this without necessarily almost punitively codifying what we need to do there, because it really is codified this way, like you said, but just having that discussion and that vote for the purpose of essentially making sure everybody is on the same page, that this is how we do this.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay. So as I said, I'll try to have Tim find the emails from Chris Lanchanton and then maybe clean up this language a little bit. If both of you will take a look at it. As I said, that last sentence I would like to change and required to meet but to speak. And if you want to soften it, Mike or Phil at all, as I said, that this will set the tone in the sense that these are the requirements. You have to tell somebody if you're not going to come. If it's second time in a row, you have to speak with the president. And then third time, if you don't, if you don't follow these steps, then you are automatically off.
Right.
Okay.
I'm not going to review it, put anything together now. I mean, there's a conversation that we need to have with Tim Burke, obviously, about or with the lawyer, just to make sure, hey, this is what we're supposed to have in here legally. So let's get this, get that base there, and then adjust what language we need to. But I think if we want to present this in any way, we should probably have another policy meeting and have Vanessa involved, so that we can all make sure we're on the same page with this and present it the way we want to.
Mm-hmm.
Since we've kind of gone over here a little bit and she had to run out.
Yeah. Well, we knew that.
All right.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll reach out to you guys with some dates that Tim's available, and we'll set something up again. Okay.
All right.
Sounds great.
And Mike, you had said you were going to reach out to Peter, but now Phil says that he's going to.
Either way, I'm happy if Phil, if you would like to, but if not, I can try and.
I'd love to. He cheered my son on in his first cross-country race while my son was dead last. Well, it was muddy. He ran 3K for his first little race.
Oh my!
Because his friends who'd done it before had done it. He fell early on and got hurt. And my little kid, who could absolutely quit and cry his way out of it, ran the entire thing, came in dead last, got across the finish line with Peter and his family cheering until they were sore. And first thing he said was, I fell and I got hurt, but I persevered and I made it to the end of the race. And I've never been more proud of my son.
Yeah.
So I would happily reach out to Peter and have a conversation with him.
Great.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
Okay, and then I'll reach out to you guys, as I said, with some dates that I get from Tim. And Phil, you're going to make the changes here or highlight the things that are doing it and send
So
them up.
I've already shared this document out to the group, so you should have an email on it. But anybody at Guilderland Public Library has access to view it, apparently. I'm just going to make sure that what I copied in here is from the main bylaws that are approved today, not the older bylaws that for some stupid reason I had pulled up, and make sure the language is the same. But I'm assuming our first proposal is this section here where we change the size of the board and the definitions for a quorum and majority vote.
Yep.
And secondly, we would be looking at making these two changes where the nominating committee is pursuant to this, assisting in filling those vacancies. And over here, it's candidate or candidates as a second proposal that we would like to bring to this current board meeting. And lastly, that we are going to ask, Barbara is going to ask Jenna to make sure that under new business, there is a conversation about a charter change to 3-year terms.
Right. Very good. Well,
Can I
thank
make
you.
one real quick tweak to this nominating committee provision here, the
Please.
section G? That sentence, the beginning of that sentence says, should a vacancy arise, and in the end it says, assist in filling those vacancies. So I would just change the beginning of that sentence to be, should vacancies arise, or should any vacancies arise, or something like that, just to
Any
so it matches.
Yeah.
I would
Good.
make it plural, and vacancies, just so it's, should any vacancies arise.
During the course of the year, the nominating committee shall, pursuant to Article 3, Section 3C, assist in the filling of those vacancies.
Right. I think you have a comma after year and make the T on the
Yeah,
little t.
I thought they were special.
I think just to make sure, like, I think we're probably okay because we're like, specifically cross-referencing this Article 3, Section 3C. But, because there are the situations like your situation, Phil, where the nominating committee really doesn't have any role. So it's only, for subsequent vacancies, or where the runner-up is not, interested in serving or whatever.
So candidate received the highest number of votes at the last election. Blah, blah, blah. Well, pursuant to this. So
Yeah,
pursuant
so
to this,
I think
it
we're
says
okay
that-
because we cross-reference that in, so, okay. I'm
Yes,
happy.
I think that covers that. Pursuant to this, we take the first person available if they're interested, and should they not be interested, the nominating committee solicits beyond there. So
Yes.
it could even be potentially read as the nominating committee is the one responsible for reaching out to the next candidate and seeing if they're available. And if they're available and interested, great. And if they're not, then they come out with a slate of other candidates.
That's even better. Yes. If you can just
And
remember
I
what you just.
realize what I just did, Mike. I realize I just made this and assumed and not exactly written, and that just made you twitch, didn't it?
A little bit.
Is
But
there language without, is it possible to not change this section and specifically only change this section that would account for that with clarity? Or would you like to review that prior to the meeting, make changes to this document and propose that at the meeting?
So here's a a suggestion. Don't know if we like this or not. But we could say, in the paragraph below the Article 3, Section 3C, right?
Yeah.
We could make it say, in the event of an incomplete term,
Oh, yeah, we're already doing this. Okay, good.
Yeah.
in the event of an incomplete term, then we say, the nominating committee shall offer the vacant trustee position to the candidate who received the highest number of votes at the last election of trustees but was not elected. Right? And then after not elected, get rid of shall be offered, because now it's so starting at shall be offered, delete that through position. Do it, go back right there, or through, right? Yeah, and
if accepted.
yeah, you could.
If
Oh,
accepted,
okay.
the candidate shall serve until the next library board election. If this candidate cannot serve, the nominating committee shall solicit interest from eligible persons and select a candidate or candidates who shall be presented for approval.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, over. That's offer. It should be shall offer.
Yeah, you're right.
So that just makes clear the nominating committee's role, and then the cross-reference makes sense with everything. And
Yeah, perfect.
all right, let's go for that.
Thank you, guys.
All right, I gotta get back to work. So
And
Same.
dates. Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, thanks a lot, guys.
bye,
Okay,
everyone.
bye.
Bye-bye.